Hello, I'm Sevil Mikhailova.
And I'm Claude Salhani, and this is This Week in Focus. And this week we will focus on a murky subject that's hard to focus on the events that happened 100 years ago in eastern Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. These are tragic events that to this day we don't really know exactly what happened.
But what is not good, some organizations unfortunately use this fact as a political mean, as a political pressure on the sides, and it's not good.
Unfortunately, this happens when you have so much at stake. There's so much at stake. There are emotions, the course of history. It depends on what historians are going to come up with, what they're going to find, the facts they're going to discover. But
one should realize that this is a very sensitive issue for the nations, for ethnicities, and I think that in this point we need to much more careful approach the things. So we know that every step and every political resolution, let's say every paper, can fuel the hatred between the nations, between the peoples, the ethnics, and it's not good.
The hatred here is directed from Armenia towards Turkey. When you talk to some Turks, they don't have that hate in them. They seem to be more conciliatory. Am I correct?
I think so, because so no matter what has happened 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, this is life. You should live together, and there is no other way. And instead, instigating the hatred, instigating the dispute, conflict between these 2 or 3 or 5. So you need to invite them at a table of talks. You need to calm this tension, and you need to bring peace for the sake of unity of the planet.
For the sake of your children, for the sake of the future, I would say.
Yes, indeed.
Well, let's talk. Let's look what the Turkish ambassador has to say. He is going to talk to us today. Alper Coşkun is the ambassador of the Turkish Republic, and without further ado, here he is. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for your time and for agreeing to meet with us today. We're here to discuss, as you know, the events of 1915 that took place in eastern Anatolia. At the time, it was known as the Ottoman Empire, today modern-day Turkey. Events that happened that are lost in the fog of war that evolved since then. The European Parliament this week, last week rather, advised Turkey or asked Turkey to recognize what happened as a genocide, as the Armenian genocide. What is your take on that?
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, it's a great pleasure for me to be together with you, and thank you for focusing on a very topical event, which is an important one. You mentioned the fog of war. Indeed, that is an important aspect of this matter that one needs to focus on. And if you look at what Turkey is trying to do, we are actually, contrary to what we used to do in the past as Turkey, where we tried to thicken that fog, today, modern Turkey is taking a very different approach to this matter. We want to help that fog lift, and we want to focus on the true nature of what happened in 1915. And yes, the European Parliament did take a decision with certain elements. We can go into the details of that, but I'd rather focus on what Turkey's been saying, because I think if one really wants to focus on the true nature of what happened in 1915, one cannot take a look simply at the events of 1915 and focus on what happened to the Armenians, but one needs to look at a much more broader context. That said, let me at the outset underline one very important matter. As you will have noticed in the statements that have been made by our current president while he was the Prime Minister last year on the 23rd of April, and in the statement, I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, that was made by our Prime Minister yesterday, Turkey pays its deepest respect to the emotions and the sufferings of the Armenians of the time. And together with all of the other Ottoman subjects of the time, we share in their agony that was triggered by the events of the time. But if one wants to understand what happened in 1915, what we're talking about, obviously, is the decision of the government of the time, of the Ottoman government, to resettle the Armenians, which the Armenians say was a planned decision on the part of the Ottoman government to annihilate all of the Armenians. Hence, they deduct from this allegation that it was a genocide. But if one wants to understand the true nature of the decision, we need to go back probably into the mid-19th centuries and try and understand what was happening to the Ottoman Empire, what the other major actors of the time were trying to do, how nationalist tendencies were coming into play, and how the Ottoman Empire was being dismembered. Those are the realities of the time. And we also have to look into how the Armenian subjects of the Ottoman Empire played into these events. If the Armenians, if the Armenian diaspora, if Armenia, Yerevan, wants to focus on what happened in 1915, if they want to understand what decision was taken, how it was implemented, it's possible to go down to the roots of all of these questions. But you can't do that in a dogmatic manner, saying that the Ottomans committed genocide, modern-day Turkey needs to recognize this. If and when you do that, then we can talk about other things. That's simply not an honest, if you will, way of looking into a matter which is extremely complex. Because if you take that approach, what you're doing is you're narrowing down over 1,000 years of integration between Armenians and Turks and Kurds and all of the other subjects of the empire to a very focused point in time, which did not come out of nowhere, which came to the fore as a result of the complex developments that I alluded to. Coming to the Parliament, European Parliament's decision, unfortunately they're making a similar mistake. They're taking a very focused and one-sided approach, which is not an honest or just approach to historical facts that are much more complex, which is why we reacted strongly to that decision. And it is neither, when you look at the nature of the decision, they make references to the 1948 Convention on Genocide, and they take that as a basis for a conclusion, which is Turkey should recognize the genocide. But any international law student in their even primary year would recognize the fact that a decision on genocide can only be taken through a court decision. So there are a lot of legal aspects that one can talk about. There are a lot of political aspects that one can talk about. But none of this, I am not saying any of these to diminish the sincere emotions that Armenians have, which we recognize. But we want to embrace those emotions, but we're only making an appeal to the international community and to the Armenians for them to understand that emotions are not in the monopoly of the Armenians when it comes to sufferings that took place at the time.
Mr. Ambassador, so how do you think, so why is it topical now? So do you regard it as a disagreement between Turkey and the EU, or do you regard it somehow to be politicized under Armenian lobbies' pressures, or something else? What was the reason?
Well, this is the 100th anniversary of the events, so when you look at calendar-wise, there's a certain meaning, obviously, for commemoration. And at the same time, of course, you mentioned the buzzword. It's politicized. Yeah. And that has been the Armenian approach to this matter, which is why they are going to political bodies all over the world to try and pressure Turkey by reaching out to the sympathies and emotions, or maybe through other methodologies of parliamentarians and politicians all over the world, to have them take these decisions and to put pressure on Turkey, which is what they're doing, which unfortunately the Pope himself has become a party of, which the European Parliament has become a party of. So when you look at it, if we consider this to be a strategic chessboard maneuver, as far as the Armenians are concerned, they've been successful in doing what? In having these decisions taken. But what is the objective? I think we need to take a step back. Everybody needs to take a step back. Armenians need to take a step back. And we need to decide, what are we trying to achieve here? If the idea is to pressure Turkey, to make Turks feel humiliated or make us angry, we could be getting a little angry here and there. But to be honest with you, we have full confidence in the historical facts. And this methodology will simply alienate Turkey from Armenia, from Armenians, which is exactly the opposite of what our appeal entails. It matters. I think you have to look at how Turkey is trying to commemorate, the Gallipoli Wars. Out of that story of suffering, where any Turk, I think, would be just in asking, what on earth were Australians doing in Gallipoli at the time? What on earth were people from New Zealand doing in Gallipoli at the time? And I think we would have been just in saying at the time, if Atatürk had said, okay, we really need to hate these Australians and New Zealanders because they had no business attacking us, killing our sons, so we will hate them for the rest of our lives unless they do this or do that. But we took just the opposite approach, which I think was not coincidental. I don't want to make any extremely statements that may sound extremely romantic, but it's a matter of fact that Anatolia, our upbringing, our culture, the way we approach the other, quote unquote the other, is very different from other societies. We have a knee-jerk reflex of embracing others, and the traditional Turkish hospitality that you hear very often, that is also germane to Azerbaijan as well, is actually a way of expressing the fact that our doors are open to everyone. This is in our upbringing, in our culture, in our religious teachings, and so on. So even out of great sufferings such as the Gallipoli War, we managed to internalize the war, to draw lessons, obviously to feel our sufferings and agony, but at the same time we managed to make an appeal out of that war that today, very happily, brings us together with Australians and New Zealanders and the very countries whom we fought against, which brings us together in a manner that, as a Turk, makes me extremely proud. This example is in great contrast to what Armenia is trying to achieve, which is the Turks were guilty, they did this, they need to accept this. And even there, when I make this point, I am not saying that I am not willing, and Turkey is not saying that Turkey is not willing to debate whatever emotion Armenians have. But our only point and argument is we need to debate the full spectrum of events that took place at the time. Suffering cannot be focused simply on the Armenians of the time. We will respect that. We can go down to the roots of what happened, how it happened, and who was guilty where and how. But in doing so, we also need to look into the activities of the Armenian committees of the time, the Tashnak Sunni Party, the Hunchak Party, what they did, how they armed their very citizens who were happy subjects of the Ottoman Empire. As far as the Ottoman Empire were concerned, they were part and parcel of the empire, and you will see that in the positions that they had within the Ottoman Empire. So it's a very complex issue, and it's very sad to see that a body such as the European Parliament does not recognize the complexity of the matter. I think we would have been fine if the European Parliament had made a call saying this is an issue that is still a topic of academic, political, and legal debate. It is obvious that Armenians have certain emotions, Turks have their own views. These parties, if you will, to this disagreement, to this argument, need to talk about it. They need to find a way to focus on this. We may not agree on everything, but to talk about it, to help heal whatever the wounds are. And the wounds are not one-sided. If we don't talk about what happened in Van and in Adana to the Turkish and to the Muslim villages, then it will be very difficult to have Turks to simply agree to talking about what the Armenians suffered about. So it's a very different take on the matter that we have in Turkey and in Armenia.
We heard a statement by Erdogan before this resolution, and it was known that the European Parliament is going to discuss this Armenian genocide, the so-called Armenian genocide, at the Parliament. And before Erdogan came out with a statement saying that it may lead to somehow the deportation of Armenians in Turkey even. So how do you see, can it lead to ethnic clashes within Turkey, such aggressive, how to say, or such politicization of the issue in the West, so between Turks and Armenians?
Yes, I don't think our president mentioned the notion of a deportation, but he mentioned the fact that the European Parliament is focusing on issues of this nature while Turkey is hosting many Armenians, some with the necessary documents to reside and live in Turkey, some which actually do not possess those documents, but to which Turkey is taking a bit of an understanding approach, if you will. His point there is you're blaming Turkey about its policies and its past and its approach to Armenians, whereas modern-day Turkey is acting in this nature. So he's contrasting that. I don't think there was a veiled threat or anything of that nature. But Turkish society is very sensitive on this, and I understand this. I'm personally very sensitive about it as well. I have 2 children. I don't want them to be stamped with something regarding their history for which we believe Turks cannot be held accountable in the manner in which the Armenians allege them to be, meaning perpetrators of an act such as genocide. We really need to take a step back when we talk to one another. The European Parliament needs to sit down and consider what kind of an allegation it is making. It is a little closer, possibly, to their experiences in Europe, so they may take it a little bit more lightly, but it is an extremely alien notion to us in Turkey. Despite the fact that the Ottoman Empire is portrayed in a certain light in Europe, it is also a fact that when the Ottoman Empire was, quote-unquote, expanding or invading the Balkans, or whatever you want to call it, however you want to call it, many of them welcomed that at the time, when actually they had different problems with their own Christian brethren, and they preferred Ottoman rule. We need to consider all of these. Of course, there are folk tales and hero stories and suffering stories. We understand all of those as a part of building nationalities in Europe, which took place during the dismemberment of all of these multinational empires. All of those are history, and we understand that. And to a certain extent, I think we can agree to not reacting to those sentiments. But at the other hand, when you come forward with an allegation of this nature, genocide, you really need to consider what you're talking about, and you need to have your facts straight. That is why there's a very strong sentiment in Turkey, and there's a very strong reaction in Turkey. But at the same time, look at what's happening in Turkey. There's a huge debate going on. If you go to Turkey, you will easily find very many people who are willing to talk to you about this matter, and Turks who will go, they will have a much different narrative compared to mine, and they say, you know what, it may have taken place, we really need to apologize, we need to do this, we need to do that. Do I agree with those views? No, personally I don't. I'm not talking in my official capacity. Personally I don't. But actually, in one way, I'm proud that Turkey has this debate. It's very good for Turkey to have multiple voices, and that is how I think we will find the right balance as to how our society as a whole will approach this matter. And when you look at what the government and what the state structure is trying to do, we're actually trying to facilitate this debate. But what needs to be done is for the Armenians to also become a part of this debate. Go to Armenia. I doubt that you will be able to find anyone openly saying, you know what, there may have been a couple of Turks killed at the time, we need to look into that as well. The Armenian approach to this matter is extremely dogmatic. They have a one-sided approach to the matter. We are challenging that. We are challenging that, and we're inviting them to the table to talk about it. Let's bring down the historical facts. Let's bring down the experts. Let's bring all of our emotions to the table. And from that, we believe, if we can have a civilized debate about this matter, an honest debate about this matter, then we can move forward.
What is the ultimate goal of Armenians so trying to get recognition for the tragedy which happened 100 years ago? So this is the key. This is a financial matter. This is a political matter, or something else?
I don't know. It's one of those things. I think there's this famous Greek writer Kavafis. He used to talk about the enemy is coming, the enemy is coming. The question is, when the enemy comes, that whole narrative collapses. It's a little bit similar in this case. What is the objective? I asked that question in my answer. I think it was to your first question. We really need to sit down and understand all together. The European Parliament has become a party to this. The Pope has become a party to this. Multiple national parliaments have become a party to this. Fine, if they want to become a party to this, let's all sit down and try and understand what it is that we're trying to do. Are we trying to punish Turkey? Even if we are, on what basis? Are parliaments the right places to make historical judgments? Are they the right places to make legal judgments? Can the Parliament of Europe tell Turkey that it has committed a genocide? Based on what authority? We need to look at all of these. If you know the Turk, you will easily conclude that his last consideration on this matter will be financial. This is all a matter of pride. This is all a matter of our embracing our past and our very solemn belief in the fact that our ancestors, even at times of war, were decent people. And I think Turkish history, when you look at all of the elements, despite the folk tales that you will have in Europe and the Balkans and so on that I mentioned, when you look at the true nature of it, Turkish history, Turkish military history, does not have the stains that some allege it to have. Our approach on this isn't financial. Now, there will be Armenians who are making these calculations. When you look at the statement that the Armenians made at the beginning of this year, explaining their strategy, if you will, on this matter, it's quite clear that they want to change borders. They currently carry Mount Ararat in their pocket as a symbol. You know, what is it that we're trying to achieve? The Armenian president is on record, ladies and gentlemen. Where's the European Parliament then? The Armenian president is on record as saying to the young Armenians that they have retaken Karabakh, and that it is up to the next generations to retake their territories in Anatolia. Where is the international community there? I commend the international community's stance on aggression against Ukraine and its support and upholding of the territorial integrity of Ukraine, which is sacrosanct as far as we're concerned. But what about when a president of a country with whom the European Union has relations, with whom every other civilized country has relations, very friendly relations, to the extent that the European Parliament can go and take a decision? Where is a decision on this issue asking Armenia to act in accordance with good neighborly relations with Azerbaijan, whom it continues to occupy 20% territory of, and with Turkey? So I asked the same question to myself. What is the objective here? If the objective is to bring sustainable peace, prosperity to the Southern Caucasus, this is not the right way. If you want to achieve something by alienating Turkey and Azerbaijan as Armenia, then you will end up in the situation that Armenia currently is in, which is that they will have recourse mainly to one big capital and no other one for their sustainability and survivability.
What is undesirable in this process so it can go on and develop, so let's say in not a good way. So some parliaments may come to a decision to recognize this genocide, or like the European Parliament call Turkey at least to recognize this genocide. What will be your counter steps, or what will be your actions to prevent such processes?
We won't do what many expect, which is, you know, they expect the angry Turk to start beating his chest here and there. We won't do that. We will continue to explain to the international community that it is unjust what they are doing. We will challenge those decisions. You know, the European Parliament that took this decision is a parliament that was elected with a vote in which 42% of the European population took part. So we will look at other elements of that decision, and we will challenge each and every aspect of it, including the legal aspect and so on. And we can easily take the fight back to them. Europe really needs to sit down and look into how World War I started, what kind of deals were made, what the objectives as far as the Ottoman Empire were concerned, and what the tools they manipulated in that regard are. We're ready to look into all of those. But the idea, or I think the prevailing philosophy here has to be this. There's one world, we all live on it, and whether we end up quarreling over this, alienating one another over this, or alienating each other over this, or coming to some sort of mutual understanding based on which we can build a more prospective and sustainable future, the choice is up to us. We vote for the second one, which is why we are appealing to the Armenians, actually. We don't want to deal through interlocutors and through third parliaments and so on. We're appealing directly to the Armenians. You know, in yesterday's statement by our Prime Minister, please look into that. I think there are very interesting elements. One thing that will take place this year is the 1915 events as they unfolded in the eyes of the Armenians will be commemorated in Turkey. The Patriarchate will be holding a ceremony. There will be another religious ceremony held at Akdamar, and Turkey is coming forward with such elements which in practice, in essence, is a very bold step on the part of Turkey to shed light and to come to terms with what happened in 1915. But this should not be misunderstood. I see very many statements, particularly that took place after the statement of our president as Prime Minister last year. Many officials in Europe were saying this is a step in the right direction, step in the right direction. They're insinuating you need to take another step and recognize what happened as is. But what needs to be done is, the step in the right direction would be, let's sit down and debate what happened. Not only based on politically motivated decisions, but on historical facts. So that's what we will advocate.
And your ministry, the Foreign Ministry of Turkey, made a statement immediately after the EP's resolution and saying that it is unserious and it has no any serious facts. And Turkey previously also made an appeal to historians to come at table and to research, to study the events of a century-old events and to see whether what happened 100 years ago. But Armenia, unfortunately, now denies to open up its archives. So what will be your step? What will be your action in this way?
Well, we will continue to appeal to historians and to that methodology, because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is a historical context that needs to be examined based on historical facts. There are plenty of archives, both in Turkey and beyond, Russia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, this part of the world, the United Kingdom. We should together make an effort, if we want to shed light on the events and help our future generations, both Armenian and Turkish, and in the greater context of this area, to have a future in which they will not see each other as the enemy, where they may see the other as someone with whose ancestors, his or her own ancestors, may have had some clashes. Think about France and Germany, for God's sake, where they are right now. Is it not possible to achieve that in this part of the world? It should be. We're making an appeal to do that. The European Parliament, in its decision, is calling on Turkey to focus on the archives. Well, that's actually our speaking note. In 2005, we made an appeal to the Armenians. We told them, and it was a joint appeal in Turkey, not only by the government, but by the opposition parties as well. We made an appeal to the Armenians saying, look, this is an issue that you have a different take on, we have a different take on. Let's sit down, focus on this matter, look at the historical facts, and try and move to the next step. Not forgetting, not denying, absolutely not, but looking at the full complexity of the issue, understanding your grievances, but you need to understand my grievances as well. That's the obvious way forward in the 21st century. Otherwise, we will continue to alienate each other. I don't want my children to grow up hating this or that nationality, this or that religion, this or that person. That's not the way I want my child to be brought up in a globalized world. They have to have a very open mind, and first of all, to approach whoever they're talking to as an interlocutor, as a human being. And then they can have the differences. They can sit down and talk about what happened in 1915 if that person happens to be an Armenian. That person will have some experiences and some stories that he or she will have heard from her family that I would like my daughter to hear about. But she will also have some things to say. They need to have this civilized debate. What's happening right now is everyone's telling Turkey to keep quiet and to accept an allegation, which is extremely extreme, and to live with it. I'm sorry, it's not that simple. And nobody, I underline that, nobody can pressure Turkey into doing this at all cost. Financial is the last consideration on our mind, trust me. That may be one of the motives, but it's the last consideration on our mind.
Well, you've heard the ambassador, the Turkish ambassador in Baku. He, I think, was very eloquent, very, very reserved, very wise in his discussions.
Indeed, it was wise.
Yeah. And hopefully people will pay attention and follow some of his advice.
We hope.
Well, we hope so too, and we hope and we wish you a better tomorrow.
Goodbye.